not on vacation though. We're ready.
Okay, let's begin. My friends, we are in the Mishnah on page 4A2. Okay? So, we're going to go back now to the Mishnah. Let's review for 1 second before we move forward with the Gemara. The Mishnah said that a person on the Moed, on the holiday, on Chol Moed, or on Shemitah is able to water an irrigated field, a field that needs to be irrigated because it doesn't have enough rainwater. You're allowed to irrigate an irrigated field on Chol Moed and on Shemitah, b'mayan shi'atzah, new spring or old spring. Okay? Aval en mashkin, but you cannot water this field lo mimei gishamim, not from rainwater, like a pool of rainwater. V'lo mimei kilon, and not from a well. So the idea here is, it seems, that you can't manually water the field on Chol Moed. Okay, so let's take a look at what this means. Says the Mishnah, says the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah. You can't do it from a pool of rainwater or from the well. The Gemara says, hold on. When we're talking about mekilon, a well, I understand that you can't do it on the holiday. Why? Because it's an excess amount of work. You need to be going down into the well, bringing up water, down into the well, bringing up water, etc., etc. Ela megishamim maitirchaika. You have a pool, a gatheration of rainwater, right? What's the issue? It's all on a surface level. That's the Gemara's first understanding here, is that a well is deep. So you need to, lower the bucket, draw the water, bring it back up. But you have rainwater, it's here, just scoop it up, You could solve the problem without any excessive amounts of work. Amar Rabbi Ela, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Elah said in the name Rabbi Yochanan, Gizera megishamim atu mekilon. We made a gezerah. What's in the well? Water that's from rainwater. What's in the pool of rainwater? Rainwater. If we allowed you to use rainwater that's just gathered on the ground, people might come, they'll think that they're allowed to use that rainwater to be able to water from a well as well. Why? What's the difference between this rainwater and that rainwater? So what did we do? We made a neat division. Spring water, good. Rainwater, bad. That's the first interpretation of the Gemara. Rav Ashi said, Megishamim gufayu lidei mekilonatu. No. When the rainwater gathers, what happens? There's a excess amount of water, it's saturated, so now it's risen to above the level. So your first few bucketfuls will be from a surface. But the minute you get past there, it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper, effectively being the same as a well. So therefore, we disallowed megishamim because every megishamim on some level is the same thing as a well, just after however many buckets. So therefore,
wells that are actually drilled into reservoirs where you're actually bringing up a reservoir of water.
So if you dug a well into a spring and the spring came up out of the well, no problem. So by the way, that is sometimes how it works. We can dig and create our own geyser, right?
Or you can just dig into the reservoir and then have a pump bring it up, where it's an underground lake.
So in general, if there's a tremendous amount of water but it's deep, that's techayitera, because you need to do this system. Now, what would happen if you built a system that without doing anything, the water was available at the top? You'd have to ask a question. Did the Chachamim make a gezerah? Is that still considered a well? And it doesn't lose its designation as a well? That would be an interesting question to ask. But assuming that a well is just a well, where you need to draw the water, assuming, right, by the way, today that we have sinks, is that a well? We have sinks. We have a sink. Yeah, you turn the water on, right? You have a hose. Turn the water on. The water, where's it coming from? It's coming from a well. What effort is there? Nothing. You turn the dial like this. So would that still be considered a well, even if there's no tircha yitera? Would we still have made that asur? So one would imagine that question depends on whether we always say that that if it came from a well, it's asur, even if you figured out a way to eliminate the tircha, or if we'll say no, wells were only tircha machines. The minute you figured out a way to eliminate the tircha, this is not a well anymore. So interesting process in halakha. We'll see how we rule.
Tircha versus rainwater is the question.
Tircha versus definition, of well being a definition, or well being a reality that has a reality of tircha yitera. Okay, says the Gemara. So these two opinions, they argue in the conversation of Rav Zera. Rav Zera said in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the name of Shmuel, Neharot hamoshchin mayim min ha'agamim. Okay, you have a stream, a river, which pulls water from a big pond. Okay, mutar le'ashkot mehen b'cholo shel moed. You're allowed to use that to irrigate the field on chol hamoed. Mar itled Rabbi Zera. One opinion holds like Rabbi Zera. Umar letle de Rabbi Zera. And one of them does not hold like Rabbi Zera. So let's look at Rashi for a second. Rashi says, Neharot hamoshchin. You see right in the middle of the page? Everyone found it? Hashta mashmale. At this point in the Gemara, we understand me'agamim, the water of a lake, okay? Avida de paski. Sometimes it stops. Right? So, says the halacha, says Rav Zera, if a person has a river coming off of a lake, then you're able to use that for chol hamoed. Says Rashi, look at the next Rashi, mutar. What's the reasoning of Rav Zera? Velo gazri, and we don't make a ruling, dilma paski psika me'agamim. Maybe the lake that's feeding this river will run dry. Ve'azal v'tarach, and then you'll go and put an effort, ve'aiti min nahar acher. So if my setup over here is to use water that's coming, a stream that's being fed by a lake, if the lake is not obviously Lake Tahoe or whatever, Lake Erie, maybe it's a small lake, maybe the lake will run out after the stream keeps bringing its waters downstream. So mutar means that we're not worried the lake will run out, and then I'm going to have to go and get another river. Says Rav Zera, we're not worried about that. Okay? Mutar, you're allowed to water your field from such a lake. Says the Gemara, so therefore, these two opinions, Rav Ila'ah and Rav Ashi, okay? Rav Ila'ah in the name of Rav Yochanan and Rav Ashi are arguing in Rav Zera. Rav Yochanan says that the reason why it's asur is because atu mekilon. We're worried from Geshamim that if we allowed you to use these rainwaters, you would use those rainwaters. You would come to use the rainwater from a well. And the other opinion is no. If the rainwater of the surface level runs out, you're going to have to go deep. The second opinion is not holding like Rav Zera, because we're telling you, you're not allowed to do this because we're worried something will happen, it will run out, and then you'll need to dig deep, and then you're going to do excessive work, even though right now it's not excessive work.
So the lake and the collected rainwater, in the second opinion, are similar.
Exactly. That's the Gemara is assuming. So the Gemara says, let's say that these two opinions are arguing in the same idea of Rav Zera. The Gemara says, Gufa, let's try to understand the ruling of Rav Zera now. Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Shmuel. Rav Zera said the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, the name of Shmuel. Narot hamoshchim mayim min ha'agamim. You have a stream that pulls water from a pond. Mutar le'ashkot mehen b'chol shel moed. You're allowed to. Et be Yirmiyah, Rabbi Zera. Yirmiyah asked the question, Rabbi Yirmiyah, to Rabbi Zera. Aval lo mimei gshamim ve'lo mimei kilon. Right? Now, we know in the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to use meg shamim, rainwater, and you're not allowed to use water from a well. If that's the case, right? What's the reason? Sorry?
Kilon is whales.
Kilon is from wells, yeah. So the Gemara seems to be asking, why can't I use the water from rainwater? It's just a gathering of rainwater. Same thing like agam. You're worried that the rainwater will drop, and then I'm going to have to dig deep, which is the same as saying that maybe the lake will run out, and then I'll need to replace it. Amaleh, Reb Zera said, Yirmiyah beri, Yirmiyah my son, Hani agamim de Babel, Kimayat lo paski damu. You can't compare, a puddle of rainwater to a river, to the Babylonian rivers. I believe that the big river over there is Euphrates, right? That runs through.
Tigris
and the Tigris, right? So you have Nahar Pirat, which is Euphrates, and you have Chidekel, exactly. So you have these two massive rivers. We're not worried that these are ever going to run out of water. So you're comparing, a little flood in your backyard, to the Euphrates River. What are you talking about? So he says, Yirmiyah, my son, it's not a good comparison. Therefore, Reb Zera is not challenged by the Mishnah, and therefore, it's not necessarily so that Reb Zera is a good parallel to the machloket of these two rabbis. Okay? Why not? Because Reb Zera said it's mutar because it will never run out.
It being those two great rivers.
It being the rivers of Bavel. But maybe when it comes to a regular rainwater, he would agree. That's what it seems like. So it turns out that in the final analysis, the Gemara gives this answer of Reb Zera to Reb Yirmiyah, it would turn out that if it was not the Babylonian river, and you were worried, maybe we would hold that you have a problem in regular rainwater because we're worried that it will run out. So we would not be able to compare Reb Zera's teaching to the machloket of Rav Yochanan and Rav Ashi. Tan Rabbanan, we learned in the Braita, hapsikot ve'abrechot shenitmalu mayim me'erev Yom Tov. If you have a pit on the side of the road, okay, a ditch, a divot, right, and brechot, and large pools, shenitmalu mayim erev Yom Tov, that they became filled with water from erev Yom Tov. Asur lashkot mehem b'cholo shel Moed. You're not allowed to feed from them your irrigated field on Chol HaMoed. But if you have an amat hamayim, which is drawn from a living natural spring, which we don't assume is going to run out, then you're able to use, if it's flowing into there, then you're able to use those things because it won't run out. Says Rashi, see, take a look about 3/4 of the way down. If a stream runs between them, ben abrechot halalu mutar lashkot me'agshamim, right? You're allowed to feed from those ditches. Paski me'agshamim mashke me'amat hamayim. Because if the ditch runs out, or if the pool of water runs out, you'll use the amat hamayim. Now, on a surface level, you read this Mishnah and you think, oh, it's talking about when the amat hamayim is running into the pool. It's running into the ditch, meaning that water will never run out. But it's clear from Rashi that that's not how he learned. It doesn't mean benehim. It doesn't mean into that. If it was running into that, then the pool would be called amat hamayim too. The ditch would also be amat hamayim. It would just be a ditch in the pathway of the amat hamayim, but it's still amat hamayim. The Gemara is telling us over here, this Mishnah is a big chidush. I'm allowed to use the ditch. I'm allowed to use because what are you worried about? You're worried about it's going to run out, and then I'm going to do excessive work. But if I have an option of no work coming right over here, what will I do if it runs out? I'll just do the other thing, which is mutar. You got the logic here. So an amat hamayim, an accessible, non-tircha version, will allow you to use something, not that is tircha now, but that if you're worried that if it runs out, I'll have to do something which is excessive work, I have available a non-excessive work option B. So option B will kosher option A, which without the amat hamayim would have been asur. Why? Because we're worried it will run out, and then you'll have to feed it using means that are asur. Let's continue. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, "V'hu shiruba shel ota sadeh shota me'oto amat hamayim." That's true. That the ruba shel ota sadeh, most of that field, let's say 51%, can be watered by ota amat hamayim, from that water field. What does that mean? What is Rav Papa saying? Says Rashi, take a look again. Sheyachol lashkot rov hasadeh bepam achat. You need to be able to irrigate the field
Once.
in one time, at once. Not once, at once. Okay? Simultaneously. Me'ota amat hamayim. אבל אם אין היכול להשקות בפעם אחד מאותה אמת המים. But if you can't feed the majority of the field from that amat hamayim simultaneously, אינו משקה מפסיקות וברכות. No, you can't. Why? Because what will happen if the amat hamayim can only feed the field at one moment? 20%. Now the ditch and the pool ran out. What am I going to do? I'm going to do excessive work to be able to irrigate the rest of the field. So the amat hamayim needs to not only be able to irrigate the field, it needs to irrigate most of the field and at one shot. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi Amar, no. Even if not the majority of the field is able to drink, since it's coming on a consistent basis, even if it can't feed it simultaneously at once, but it will get to it. It will eventually be fed. You're not going to worry about it and force yourself to do the excessive work, so it would still be mutar. Kivan dechamash chavatya. Memarama, the person will say, Ilo shatya lechad yoma, tishti litreu tlata yoma. Let's say the field won't be watered in one day from this spring. Okay, in 2 days it'll get it. In 3 days it'll get it. I have nothing to worry about. There's no reason for me to go start digging ditches and drawing water from wells and doing all sorts of other work. So therefore the person is not going to go to that effort and we have nothing to worry about. Continues the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, we learn, you have a pool of water, which is a gathering of rainwater, that's dripping water slowly into a sadeh bet hashlachin, an irrigated field. Yeah, mutar lashkot mimena sadeh bet shlachin acheret. You're allowed to take from that pool of water and let it go into another field. What? Why? Aren't we worried about the fact that that pool might run out? In which case, what will you do? You'll go and dig yourself, or through excessive work, bring more water. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, ve'adayin hi mitaftefet. The water is still trickling from the upper field into the pool. So therefore, we have no worried about it. Let's just review. So you have a brecha that is receiving water from a higher irrigated field. So you have an irrigated field on a mountainside. Then you have a pool of water. Then you have another field. The halacha is I could water the bottom field from that pool. Maybe it will run out. That's true. But while it's running out, you still have water slowly going into that pool. Right. And since the water is slowly going to that pool, we're not worried that there's going to be an issue of it because it has a source of water coming to it. So now, let's just be clear. What's the chidush in this Gemara? What's the Gemara telling us? We said already, like, if the amat hamayim is coming into it, that brecha is never going to run out. So what's a chidush over here? The chidush over here is that it doesn't have a stream of water. It has a slow trickling of water. So the Gemara is basically teaching us laws here in stages. First, we had the machloket that we just had about Rav Papa and Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi said, listen, even if it's going to take 2 days, 3 days for my field to get watered, you know what human nature is? They're not going to bother. They're not going to do the work. It's going to get to it. Now the Gemara says, okay, well, what about if the Bet HaShlachin is slowly getting drips from the upper field that's oversaturated, okay, from its irrigation? The Rabbi Yirmiyah explains, no, that's enough. You know, even though it's just getting trickles, we're still not worried. So we keep minimizing. We're trying to play with the boundary of what would classify as a brecha, a pool, a ditch, a well, or whatever that's filled with rainwater that we're not worried about. Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Abaye added to the words of Rabbi Yirmiyah, Hu shelo pasak mayan rishon. How is the brecha, how is the pool getting its water so we're not worried about it running out from the trickling down of the irrigated field? Where is that field getting its water from? If it's getting its water from a ma'ayan, no problem, because the ma'ayan doesn't end. So therefore, the spring keeps bringing it. But if the water trickling down is coming from a pool which is above the top field, which could also dry out, so then the same way that could dry out, this could dry out. So therefore, that would be asur. But if a top field is fed by a spring, and the bottom field is fed by a pool, you're allowed to feed it from a pool on Chol HaMoed. Why? Because even if it's coming slowly, it will keep coming because that is a ma'ayan. And if you're worried about it drying up, you have nothing to fear because the source of the top field is a inextinguishable and unending source of watering of water. Gemara continues. Tanya, we learned in the Braita Rav Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Shte arugot zu lemala mizu. Let's say a person has an aruga is a line of planting. Okay, so you planted a line, a bunch of plants. So you have shte arugot, 2 lines, 2 beds of planting. Zu lemala mizu. One is higher on a pitched slope than the other. Lo yidale min hatachtona v'yashke et ha'elyona. You can't take, let's say water is running off of the bottom one, and put it back on the top one. Why? Because that's like the action of drawing water from a well. It's a lot of effort. Yoter alken amar Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. More than that, Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon taught us, afilu aruga achat, even if you have one bed, chetzia namuch v'chetzia gavoa, it's one bed planted like this. So the bottom of the line is lower than the top. Lo yidale mimakom namuch v'yashke lemakom gavoa. You can't re-irrigate from the bottom to the top because that's the action of drawing from the well. However, you could pour on the top and let the top one seep down to the bottom because that's not tircha yitera. That's called gravity. The Gemara continues. Tanu Rabbanan, we learn in the Braita, Madlin liyirakot kidei leochlan. A person is allowed to draw water for yirakot, for vegetables, leochlan, in order to eat them on Chol HaMoed. V'im b'shvil yapotan. The reason is you're watering on the holiday in order for them to be in a better state, for them to be fatter, plumper, whatever, to grow larger. If it's to improve them, what's the halakha? Then asur. We've already seen this concept before, except that the Gemara over here seems to be saying something different. Can someone prove this to me? How do you know that what Nathan just said is not the point of the Gemara? Nathan said, we learned this already, that you're allowed to feed a loss, but not a profit. Because the Gemara added extra words over here. The Gemara did not say, Madlin li yirakot kidei shelo yamutu. You could water vegetables in order that they don't die. in order they don't wither or wilt. It doesn't say that. It says in order to eat them on Chol HaMoed. This is new.
Right. On a purpose.
We never talked about that. We talked about the field where the wheat or whatever is going to die if I don't do it. So what's going on? What's going on over here? Right? Are you with me, guys? Why did we suddenly change the goalposts? Take a look over here. And I think I'm wondering if someone will realize why we required more over here. I wonder if anyone will realize. Take a look again at the Gemara in the Tanu Rabbanan. Look at Rashi, second to bottom line. Madlin lirakot, mashma shu dolem mayim mashke lirakot kidei leochlan mecholo shel moed. Be'im bishvil, he's doing it in order to eat them on the holiday. V'im bishvil liapotan, if you're trying to make them more beautiful, shigadlu hayirakot, asur, the harvacha, that's asur because obviously it is harvacha, it's profit. Is Rashi telling you that that's what's going on over here? I want you guys to notice something about the Gemara. I want someone to say something. Look again at the Tanu Rabbanan. What do we have over here that's extra that we did not have?
Eating on the holiday.
Sorry?
Enjoying the holiday.
Eating on the holiday.
That's what it added. But what I'm asking is, why did we change the goalposts? Why didn't we just say that you could water vegetables that are going to suffer a loss? That are going to wither? That are going to die? Why did the Gemara keep it synonymous and keep it consistent with everything we've had up until now? What is this adding? Why did we add something here?
To beautify the holiday.
Sorry?
To beautify the holiday.
Yeah, the holidays.
So you're not profiting in the marketplace, but
Right.
you are enhancing the chidur of the holiday.
I'm asking, why do you need that?
Because otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to.
No, you'd be allowed to if it just wasn't a loss. All these times we're talking about it not being a loss. You're not eating it on Chol HaMoed. You're just avoiding a loss. So how come all of a sudden over here we threw in this extra condition? It's not enough just not to lose. You have to also be eating it on Chol HaMoed. Why are we having that extra condition?
Otherwise, no.
Look carefully. Look carefully at the words again. What are you noticing?
Here. 4-0.
What's the first word of the Braita? Tanu Rabbanan.
Madlin.
Madlin. What does madlin mean? Dole. Deli.
Oh, a racket.
Deli is a bucket.
Lasso.
What does madlin mean?
Maybe to gathering.
You can draw water in a bucket and water the plants, the yirakot, the vegetables. Up until now, what did we allow for loss? Now madlin, mashkin. You have a spring. The spring is coming by itself. We allowed you to direct the water where you're doing no work in an irrigated field.
Okay, yes, nothing.
Says the Gemara over here, but are you allowed to draw from a well? No. Says the Gemara, madlin lirakot, you could draw water for vegetables. Now here it's not enough to just say there's a loss, because up until now we've said clearly that for a loss, what are you allowed to do? To direct the spring, not to draw water. Directing a spring is no work. You're just aiming the spring. You're dragging your foot to the field. The water will flow there by virtue of the fact that there's force. Right. To draw water, we never said you're allowed to do for a loss. Says the Braita over here, hold on. If you're going to use the object on the holiday, you could even draw. The excess work is asur for your work, for your field. But if I'm preparing for the holiday, if I'm using this vegetable for my meal on Chol HaMoed, then he says even excessive work is mutar. Drawing. That's why I wanted to see if you guys would pick up on the word madlin. We draw the water. Now there's two approaches in this Braita. That's one approach. One approach is that the reason why we added this new condition of using it on the holiday is because we're no longer talking about an irrigated field with a spring. We're talking about an irrigated field, but withdrawing the water from the mekilon, which was always asur. And here it's mutar because not only is it loss, it's also going to be used on the holiday. A second way of understanding this is that we're talking about a non-irrigated field. What do we say in the Mishnah? That you can only water a field that's an irrigated field. A bet habal, a field that gets its sustenance from rainwater, it doesn't need to be irrigated because it's situated, it's low in the valley, whatever the case might be. It survives with rainwater, it doesn't need irrigation. What do we say? Are you allowed to irrigate it? Are you allowed to bring a spring to there on Shabbat, on the Chol HaMoed? No. You know why? Because it doesn't need it. So it won't be a loss. All it will be is a profit. Says the Mishnah now, what happens if I have a rainwater field and I have vegetables, but I want to use them on the holiday? And watering them will improve them for my use on the holiday.
This is for personal use.
I would be allowed, personal use? Yeah.
It's enough vegetables
To eat on Chol HaMoed, yes. So I could water what I'm going to eat on Chol HaMoed, even though it's a rainwater field. So let me just explain what we did. I asked you a question. We already knew that if you're watering for avoid loss but not for profit, you're allowed to do that on Yom Tov. So why is the Braita over here telling you that you have to use it on Chol HaMoed? So there's really only two levers we could pull. Remember, the Mishnah says you can water only an irrigated field, not a rainwater field. Then the Mishnah says, and you could use only a spring, not a well. Comes the Mishnah and says, it has to be for loss, and you have to use it on Chol HaMoed. What could that possibly be? The two opinions in how to learn this Braita is either pulling lever one or pulling lever two. Either it's because we're not talking about a spring, we're talking about a well, so we're talking about the thing that we did not allow you to do, and therefore you need this extra condition, or we pull the other lever, that it's still talking about a spring, but now we're talking about a field which is a rainwater field. In either scenario, if I either was asur because of effort or was asur because of profit versus thing, this Braita would now be telling you that would be allowed, and that's a machlok in Rishonim how to learn this Braita. Continues the Gemara. Ravina v'Rabba Tosfa. Ravina and Rabba Tosfa havu, they were havu. I lost the place. Chazula gavra. They saw a certain person. They saw a person who was drawing water with the pitcher on Chol HaMoed. Amale Rabba Tosfa'a le Ravina. Rabba Tosfa'a said to Ravina, Le'tima le'shamte. Let's put him in cherem. Guy is watering. He's drawing water from the well to water his fields on Chol HaMoed. Amale, Ravina said to Rabbi Tosfa, V'atanya, doesn't the Braita say, Madlin lirakot kedei leochlan, that you're allowed to draw water in order to be able to eat them on Chol HaMoed? Amale, Rabbi Tosfa said to him, Mi savret, my madlin maya? You thought that drawing in the Braita means drawing water? In which case, this guy would be doing what he's allowed to do. My madlin, what does madlin mean? Shelufe. It means that you're able to pull out the vegetables from the other vegetables. So in other words, you're allowed to harvest those vegetables. Madlin yirakot. Says Rashi, shlufe, kisha yirakot ritzufin, when you have a line of carrots in the ground, so to speak, notel mehem benatayin leochlan. you're allowed to yank out one out of the middle in order to eat it. Mutar liapotam asur. If you're going to eat them, you're able to do that on Chol Moed. Liapotam. But if you want to make the remaining carrots grow better, and that's why you're pulling out this carrot, okay, because it's too close to the other ones. Bishvil liapotan otam shenisharin. It's asur to do it in order to make the other ones grow better. So Rabba Tosfa'ah learned this braita about something completely different. So therefore, he didn't have a way of justifying why a guy who draws water from the well on Chol Moed is going to be watering his field. Because this braita doesn't tell you that, according to him. Kiditanan, where do we find that word madlin, which we said comes from the word dili, which means a pail, so therefore it means to pail water out of a well. Kiditanan, we're in the Mishnah, hamedel bagefanim, a person who is medel, from a lashon of dal. What does dal mean? Dal means someone who's poor. Or dal means to take out. Okay? So medal, so if a person is medal bagefanim, he pulls out vines that are two-packed. Kishem shehu medal b'shelo, kachu medal b'shel aniyim. So just as he's able to do so for his own, he's also able to do it for the vines, the grapes of the aniyim. What does that mean? What is the grapes of the aniyim? Why is he responsible for them? How is it relevant? We know that there's various things in a field that are designated, set aside for the poor. So Pe'ah, as an example, the corner of his field. Whose vines are in the corner? Who's gonna own those vines? The poor man. So when I'm pulling out and thinning out my own vines, you're able to do it also for the poor. Okay? So let's just take a look. What does Rashi tell us? What's the context of this? Hamedal tolesh begefanim. Someone who's pulling out vines. Sheyeshnan biyachad yoter midah, because there's too many. B'shel aniyim bepe'ah. What does it mean, the poor people? It means pe'ah, in the corner of the field. Inami, another answer is olelot she'eno lo katef lo natef. There's something called olelot, which means that when a cluster of grapes is growing in a specific way, which does not have a shoulder, like the edge of the vine, lo natef. So certain conditions that the vine needs to have, olelot also go to a poor person. So if you see that, you also know that those vines, they don't belong to you, they belong to somebody else. So therefore, the halacha is that a person's allowed to do so in order to improve the crop. So, says the Mishnah, you're able to do this not only for your own, but also for that of the ani, that of the poor person. Why? Even though technically it belongs to the poor person, so why would you be allowed to yank off those vines that belong to him, they don't belong to you? The answer is, even though they belong to him, if he were here right now, would he be happy with what you're doing? Yes, because thinning out the vines makes the remaining grapes grow much better. So therefore, you're allowed to do what you would do for yourself, you're also allowed to do in the portion of the ani. Those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, B'shelo rashai. You're allowed to do your own. V'eno rashai b'shvel aniyim. You're not allowed to do it for the ani, for the poor person, because you know what? When it comes to a rich man is worried about grade A grapes. A poor man is worried about food. So you know what? Don't do me any favors and improve the quality of my grapes. Let me have the maximum amount of food. Says Rabbi Meir, therefore you're not allowed to thin out the grapes, and we don't assume that that's what the poor man would say that he would want it. Short story long, like they say. What do you see from here? That the word midalim means to thin out the crop. So Rabba Tosfa'ah says, that's why I learned that Mishnah of madlin lirakot about thinning out vegetables. I don't have a Mishnah that says that you're allowed to draw water for vegetables if you're going to eat them on Chol HaMoed. Says the Gemara, Amaleh, so Ravina said to Rabba Tosfa'ah, Vatanya, doesn't it say specifically, right? A Braita says, Madlin Maim liyirakot kidei leochlan. So in this case, in the Mishnah that we brought, what does it say? It says in the Braita, Madlin liyirakot kidei leochlan. We thought it meant you draw water for vegetables. Rabba Tosfa says, no, it means that you could thin the vegetables. But I have another Braita that says explicitly, Madlin Mayim liyirakot. I'm allowed to draw water for yirakot. Kidei leochlan. Amaleh, he said, Tanya. If you have a Braita, you have a Braita. Let's just be clear. We've said this before. When it came to Mishnayot, they all had all the Mishnayot. So therefore, a Talmid Chacham would know that there was another Mishnah. However, when it came to Braitot, the Braitot were not recorded in the same way as the Mishnah. So you could have someone that would know more Braitot or have heard more Braitot than someone else. Because they were not recorded and written down and disseminated in the same way as the Mishnayot were. So Ravina Tosfa, he understood, he only had this Braita. So he learned that this is what it means because he discovered the word madlin in another place, and that's what it meant. So therefore he said, no, it doesn't mean madlin maim lirakot. It means madlin lirakot. Rabba then tells him, what do you mean? I have another Braita. The Braita says, madlin maim lirakot. Huh? That was a dad joke to end all dad jokes. That one needs to be recorded for posterity. Nathan Lowe just made a beautiful joke. He said, it turns out Rabba was brighter than Ravina Tosfa. Okay. Ronnie, I only see a picture of your face with a smile on it that's fixed. I'm not sure if that's you not laughing because you don't approve of the dad joke, or because there he is. It's a big smile on Ronnie's face. Okay. Hazaku Aruch. Okay. Let's end here because the next piece is moving on to the next part of the Mishnah. Baruch Hanei Le'olam. Amen. Amen.